Thank you all for coming today, Izuku said as he addressed his audience. Currently, Izuku was at the front of a police meeting room, speaking to a large group of pro-heroes. Shouldn't a member of the police be leading this meeting or a pro-hero? Kamui Woods asked. No. Anyway, let's move on to what we need to talk about, Izuku said. As all of you know, my facility was attacked, yet again. Unfortunately, this attack was far larger and far more successful than the previous ones. 2 Chaos Emeralds were stolen, and even worse, my daughter Kiba was kidnapped. And what exactly is a Chaos Emerald? Aizawa asked. They are gems containing immense power. Enough to sink a quarter of Japan back into the ocean. Izuku explained, causing everyone to look at him with shock and horror. Just holding one can grant its user immense power. Thankfully the human body can't fully utilize its power normally, but it's still exponentially more potent than Tigger, and does not share its negative side effects. You just had something like that in your house. Death Arms balked. As I'm sure you've realized by now, these must be returned, at all costs. Izuku continued. The same goes for my daughter. Unfortunately, we've only been able to locate one of the emeralds. Normally we'd be able to locate both of them, however, it seems like one was taken out of the sea, and thus out of the range of my trackers. We've also been unable to locate my daughter's energy signature, meaning she is likely being tampered with. What does that mean? MT Lady asked, out of both curiosity and concern. It means her body and mind are likely being altered, in the same way those Nomu were altered, Izuku said, trying not to choke on his own rage. What? Fat Gum shouted out in rage. Fortunately, I have a way to restore her should be the case, Izuku said. But with that in mind, the last known location of Kiba was close to the Chaos Emerald we currently know the location of. This means that the emerald we're tracking is likely in the hands of the League of Villains. More specifically, their leader, their true leader, All For One. All Might's eyes widened. Are we really going to discuss him here? With all these other heroes? Now All For One's specific abilities are on a need-to-know basis, and according to the government, none of you need to know, Izuku explained. Wait, hang on a minute, you're sending us to fight a guy, and you're not telling us what he can do? Death Arms objected. Everything about All For One is heavily classified. I had to fight the government, just to get the right to tell you about his existence. Izuku explained. Trying to get permission to let me tell you more, is simply not worth it when time is against us. And most of you won't be fighting him anyway. All For One is extremely dangerous, even without the emerald. With it, you'd all be slaughtered in an instant. The only person here that will be going up against him is All Might. The rest of you will be in charge of evacuation and rescue, as well as fighting any Nomus he might send out during the battle. Izuku pressed a button on the remote he was giving, and a hollow projector showed up, giving everyone a look at a map of the city, with a large red ring around it. Everyone within this radius must be evacuated, as quickly as possible. Only issue is, as soon as we start evacuating, All For One is sure to catch on, so the fight will start quickly after. That's quite a large radius. Does this All For One really have such destructive power? Mandalay asked. With a Chaos Emerald, absolutely, Izuku said. But he's not the main reason. The main reason we're evacuating this large of an area is for Plan B. Should All Might be unable to defeat him, then our only option will be to rely on the reset bomb. A bomb? What kind of bomb do you have that hits harder than All Might? Mariko asked. It's not a matter of power. The reset bomb's ability is an expansion of the quirk of my daughter Eri. Izuku explained. It will return an area to how it was, many years ago before human civilization even touched these lands. And anyone that's caught in the blast, would simply cease to be. Rewinded to before they even existed. All of their matter erased. Unless you have an ability that specifically counters the bomb's effect, you will not survive this. No matter how powerful you are. Oh, well that's horrifying, Fat Gum commented. Am I the only one worried about the absurdly dangerous things you're just keeping in your house there, Midoriya? I won't lie and say that it's not concerning. Izuku sighed. But scientific progress will always move forward. We just have to live with that. Anyways, further details will be sent to you all privately, on how to help with the evacuation. For now, this meeting is over. All Might, I would like to talk to you privately at my house in a few hours. Endeavor, I actually need to talk to you immediately. I'll be meeting you at your home soon. What? For what reason? Endeavor asked. For reasons unrelated to any of this. It's a more private matter, Izuku said as he started leaving the room. Believe me, you don't want to talk about this here. Oh, and make sure your children are there too. It involves them. And without another word, he left. What on earth does he want? Endeavor wondered. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX table, waiting for Izuku to arrive. They heard the door open, and footsteps coming towards them. Is that Midoriya? How did get in without a key? Endeavor thought. His question was answered immediately when Natsuo walked in, with Izuku behind him. Natsuo! Endeavor looked at his eldest living son in shock. Midoriya had said that this involved his kids, but to have convinced Natsuo to come here for this had to be important. Believe me, I don't want to be here. But I don't have a choice. Natsuo said, looking at his father with the usual disgust. It's too important. What's going on? Fuyumi asked nervously. Izuku sat down next to Natsuo and took out a file from his bag. I think it would be best if you read this. Do note that these are official government files, and everything in them has been verified. The green-haired teen slid the file over to Endeavor, who opened it up to see what this was all about. Only for his eyes to widen a second later, with a look of sheer disbelief taking over his face. No, that can't be. It's impossible. Dad, what is it? Fuyumi asked, but her father didn't respond. Instead, Endeavor started rapidly reading through the files. They could see his eyes move across the words on each page, looking at everything as closely as possible. And as he was reading, so engaged with the files was he, that some things started to fall out. Papers, and more importantly, photos. One of the photos fell onto the table, and Fuyumi and Shoto looked at it. A moment later, their expressions matched their father's. Tuya? Fuyumi gasped in disbelief, as she looked down at the photo of Tuya, in the Midoriya Foundation infirmary. Wait! I don't recognize this picture. When was this taken? Yesterday, Izuku answered. As it turns out, Tuya Todoroki is very much alive. That's impossible. Fuyumi shouted out, more confused and overwhelmed than she'd ever been in her life. And that said a lot. It's true, Natsuo said, causing everyone, including Endeavor, to turn their attention to him. I've seen him. Midoriya took me to meet him yesterday. It's him. How? Endeavor demanded. How is alive? Where did you find him? Why didn't he return home? Why is he still a child? I can only answer one of those questions, Izuku said. Tuya Todoroki somehow survived the incident that led everyone to believe he was dead, and later became the villain known as Dabi, changing his appearance to disguise himself, and going on to commit several crimes, including many murders. Everyone except Natsuo looked at him with shock and horror. Fuyumi covered her mouth with her hands, as tears started forming out of the corners of her mouth. Tuya killed people. He became a villain. No, that's impossible. Tuya wanted to be a hero. Why would he do that? I don't know, but it's what happened. Izuku said, giving her a bit of a sympathetic look. Dabi joined the League of Villains in their attack on my home, and more specifically my children, and ended up as a victim of my daughter Aries' quirk, Rewind, returning him to his younger state, and removing all memories he had up until the age he was rewinded to. Which is how he ended up with us. Of course, we were shocked to see the long-thought dead eldest child of the Todorokis, but we verified it through DNA and memory scans. Tuya Todoroki survived, and become the villain Dabi. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, unfortunately. That. Fuyumi was too shocked to say another word. She just sat there frozen, with tears rolling down her cheeks. Big brother. Why? We can only guess as to his motivations, Izuku said. Dabi was a loner, he never got close to anyone, and killed half the people he met. So he was the only one who knew the full story. But now those memories are lost. Of course, we could rewind him back into Dabi, but that is not advisable. I know why he did it, Natsuo growled, as he glared daggers at his father. It was because of you. What? Endeavor whispered, looking rather lost. As soon as you found out he wasn't your perfect heir, you threw him away like garbage. And replaced him? Natsuo shouted at his father as loud as he could, tears glimmering in his own eyes. The reason he didn't come back. It's because of you. I'd bet my life that he killed those people because of you too. Just to get back at you. Endeavor was at a loss for words, as his now second oldest living son's words hit him like All Might's fist. You're the reason he went down the path of a villain. Natsuo yelled passionately. He killed those people to get back at you for abandoning him. They're dead because of you. Enough. Izuku shouted firmly, giving Netsuo a warning glare. Do you remember what talked about on the ride here? If you can't control your anger, then I might have to reevaluate my offer. Immediately Netsuo backed down, as fear and panic overtook his face. Wait. I'm sorry. I swear this doesn't happen often. It's just when I see his face. Offer? Shoto noted. What offer? Izuku sighed. This is where things got messy, well messier. Well, now that we have a young and alive Tuya Todoroki on our hands, the first thing we need to figure out is custody. Because I've heard about everything you've done to your family from Netsuo. And I have no intention of letting you have custody of that child, ever again. What? Endeavor stood up and looked at Izuku with shocked and outraged eyes. You can't do that. Fuyumi gasped. Actually I can, Izuku said. Remember, Toyua Todoroki was a villain. Even if he's just a child now, there is a precedent for the child's fall into evil, and that means he qualifies as an OPC. Which DOC can take custody of him, at any point should think it necessary to protect the public. And since DOC is basically under my full control, that means I can decide the matter of custody over Toyua, however I please. That's absurd. Fuyumi shouted. Yes, but what's more absurd is that you seem to be all for returning a child to an abusive parent, Izuku said harshly, glaring at her and causing her to back away a bit in fear. Is the position a teacher should be taking? If you genuinely believe that returning Toyua to the same unhealthy environment that brought him down the path of villainy, then I think I need to have a conversation with your employees. Fuyumi's eyes widened in fear, and she immediately went quiet. Enough. Endeavor growled, regaining his composure, if only a little bit. Threaten me all you wish, but leave my children out of it. Izuku glared at him. Pretending to be a father now won't help you. What is that you want, Midoriya? Endeavor barked. You didn't have to tell me this. With the type of power and influence you wield, you didn't need to tell any of us Tuya was alive. And what you said with Netsuo. What do you want from me? Izuku sighed and shook his head. I have two issues. One, the public will eventually find out about this, and that will cause massive issues. I could either expose everything you've done to your family to explain myself and watch his trust in heroes dips massively, and causes massive chaos. Or I could not explain anything, and everyone will be against me for taking the child of the number 2 hero against his will. And the second issue I have is that Tuya has no memories of you replacing him like a broken TV, so he wants to be with his family. And I have a strong feeling that if I try to keep him away from his family or tell him what happened, it'll only cause serious trouble. And since yet again, I'm not letting him come back here, there's only one option. Give custody to Netsuo. Endeavor and Fuyumi were shocked, while Shoto raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's a good idea? Netsuo can barely take care of himself. Netsuo opened his mouth to combat that statement, but Izuku spoke first. I have every intention of giving him a larger house, fit for raising a child, and giving him a better job, Izuku explained. As well as some instruction on how to take care of a child. But first I need to give him custody. Right now, custody still lies with Endeavor. I can take it away and give it Netsuo by force, but again, the public will find that odd, and start sticking their noses in things. So the best way for this to go is for you to sign away your custody, and give to Netsuo. Izuku then pulled out a stack of papers and a pen and slid them over to Endeavor. Sign this. If you cooperate, you'll be allowed to at least see your son again, and it'll maintain your public image better than the alternative. If you refuse, then you'll suffer the consequences. I'm only giving you one way forward, and you can decide if you want to make that path easier or harder. Now, chose. I have a lot of things I need to do today. Endeavor looked at the papers and slowly picked up the pen. It was all so much for him to process, and it all happened so fast that he couldn't even get his thoughts together. Fuyumi put her hand on his and gave him a kind look. Dad, I think you should sign this. At least we'll be able to see him again. I don't want us to be apart anymore. Endeavor looked at his daughter, before looking back at the papers. It's not like I have a choice. And so, he signed. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX start the conversation. You look tired. All Might noted. I am tired, Izuka confirmed. I'm the most tired I've ever been. And yet I can't sleep at all, but enough about that. We have a lot to talk about. Firstly, I need you to get rewound by Eri. All Might gave a hesitant, but understanding look. Will I really not be able to stand a chance without doing that? You couldn't manage to kill him back when you were at full strength, and he didn't have a Chaos Emerald. Izuku pointed out. In this state, you won't even be able to hold him off. We need you back at full power if you want to stand a chance. I see. But what if it really does get rid of One for All? All Might asked. What then? Then I will have no choice but to unleash Zero, Izuku said with a resigned look. All Might almost choked out some blood. Zero? Are you sure? We won't have any other options. The Gammas could hold off All for One, but if he's using the Chaos Emerald, then it's no good, Izuku explained. And Ochiko's body isn't ready to fight against someone like All for One, especially not an empowered version. At that rate we might as well just give him One for All. Zero will be our only real option. But hopefully, all goes well and we won't have to resort to that. Izuku, why don't I use one of those Chaos Emeralds? All Might asked. Izuku shook his head. One for All is pushing your body to the limit already. If it gets enhanced by a Chaos Emerald, at best it doesn't do much, and at worst you explode. At least that's what Might tells me. Damn it. All Might swore. And I suppose the same goes for young Uraraka. Basically. Izuku nodded. As I said, you and Zero are our only options. Well, that's not reassuring. All Might said as he looked down at his hands and sighed. All this wouldn't have happened if I just finished him all those years ago. If it wasn't for me, you and your children would have never had to suffer so much. I'm sorry, young Midoriya. We can't change the past, for the most part, Izuku said. All we can do is try to make sure we don't repeat our missteps. Right, this time the bastard dies. All Might swore. Speaking of him, I have some more news to give you, Izuku said. You remember All for One's puppet? Tamura Shigaraki? Yes, I recall he destroyed me quite a bit. All Might said. Well, he fell victim to Aries' quirk, and was reverted back to a child, Izuku explained. Allowing us to figure out his true identity. And his identity is Tenko Shimura, Nana Shimura's grandson. And then the room went completely quiet for just a moment. Crack! All Might's teacup fell to the ground and the tea that had been splat all over the floor. Blood soon fell and mixed in the tea, as the shock of what had been said caused All Might to start bleeding from the mouth. What? Tenko Shimura went missing quite some time ago. He disappeared at the same time his family was found dead, Izuku explained. Notably, pieces of both his family and his home were found in massive piles of dust. Dust? But that means that. All Might trail off, not wanting to finish that sentence. That he killed his own family. Hopefully by accident, Izuku said. Some people reported seeing the child walk around the streets around that time, but after that, nothing. That's likely when All for One got his hands on him. I'm guessing he chose to raise the child as a minion, as a way to get back at you and Nana Shimura. All Might had to take that in for a second before his face twisted in absolute rage. All for One, how much must you destroy before you're satisfied? How many lives must you ruin? I'll swear on my master's soul I'll kill you this time. With my own 2 hands. That would be great, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, Izuku said. At the very least we've undone most of the damage. Although I can't say things are going to be easy with him. Not only do I have to tell him that his family is dead, I also have to take away his quirk, before it comes in. I had my do some tests on him, and apparently, somehow Tenko's quirk was weakened, and it's actually far stronger than we've seen. Not only can it decay things far faster, but anything that touches something that's decaying, will also decay. A quirk like that is enough to be labeled a level 2 OPC, and thus cause for quirk removal. I understand. All Might said as he hung his head. What a cruel twist of fate. Master sent away her child to keep him safe from All for One, and yet died at the hands of his own son before he then would go on to serve All for One. And now he's condemned to quirklessness. Just like I was. It's like some sick poem. I also have to take care of the girl. Toga Himiko. Or just Himiko now. Izuku's face scrunched up in disgust. I visited her parents, and not only were they just awful, they made it very clear they didn't want their daughter back. With parents like those, it's little wonder she ended up the way she did. It's heartbreaking how many terrible parents there are. All Might sighed as he got up to clean the tea and blood he'd spilled everywhere. Tell me about, Izuku said, as he looked down at his tea, and saw his own reflection. Tell me about it.